Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Bagmati in Nepal. Now, these districts, I think they say in Nepal districts, aren't labeled on this map. I think that might have to do with the fact that they just renamed them all a couple years ago. They were very imaginatively called Region 1, Region 2, Region 3. I think through Region 7, Bagmati was Region 3. Now it's Bagmati, which is a much nicer name. Anything's better than Region 3. But my map didn't label the regions. It does that to a few countries, so I had to draw it in, and I did a really terrible job this time, if I may do say so myself. It comes down here, up over here. I hope you can see. Right up there. And then it has this big border here with the Tibet Autonomous Region of China, and with a little bit right here with India. Looks like Bihar state. So, of course, the most dominating geographic feature of this area and all of Nepal are the Himalayan mountains. Himalayas. Mount Everest is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the border of the district here. But all of these mountains here are absolutely massive, like 6,000 to 7,000 meters, which is like 19 to 23,000 feet. I don't know my numbers, but they're very big. They're the tallest mountains in the world. But there is another mountain range that cuts right down here, which is obviously not nearly as big, but it's been called the Lower Himalayas. This map calls them the Mahabharat range, which is a nicer name, I think. And in the middle is a little valley section here, and that is the Kathmandu Valley. So yes, tonight we are talking about Kathmandu, which is the capital of Nepal. But it is not the capital of Bagmati. That would be a little town that's about right here, so in the crease of my book, called Hetauda. It's very small. I wonder why they picked it. It's interesting that because they chose new capitals when they renamed all the regions. And I guess they didn't want Kathmandu to be the capital of Bagmati, because it's the capital of all of Nepal. So they made a new capital, which is quite nice, I guess. Very interesting. Kathmandu is, of course, the most famous spot in Nepal. For most people heading over to Everest, that's where you're going to fly in and probably buy most of your equipment before heading out toward the mountain. You can do it through the Tibetan side, but apparently the Chinese government jacks up the prices, and it's I think it's an easier climb, but it's more expensive. Plus you have Sherpas on this side. But we're not talking about Everest tonight. We're talking about Kathmandu. So Kathmandu is the place where almost everyone who climbs Everest starts their journey. And it is absolutely loaded with history and beautiful historic sites. And thankfully they are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So let me grab my tablet. And we're going to read about the Kathmandu Valley and all of the various sites they chose. The cultural heritage of the Kathmandu Valley is illustrated by 7 groups of monuments and buildings which display the full range of historic and artistic achievements for which the Kathmandu Valley is world famous. The 7 include the Durbar squares of Hanumandoka in Kathmandu, or like the Kathmandu Durbar Square. There's also Patan and Bhaktapur, the Buddhist stupas of Swayambhu and Bodhanath, and the Hindu temples of Pashupati and Changu Narayan. Let's look at the pictures. All sorts of sites here. The most famous by far is the Kathmandu Durbar Square. This is the Patan one here. They're all very similar in architecture. Some beautiful prayer wheels. But Kathmandu is a huge mush of Hindu and Buddhist beliefs all next to each other, which is really interesting landscape to see, to be honest. It's really pretty and very unique. And Durbar Square is world famous. It's instantly recognizable. From what I've seen in videos and pictures and all that doing this research, it looks like it's absolutely overrun by people taking advantage of all the tourists here, selling them trinkets and things. It's absolutely swarmed. But you can see Bhaktapur here. I'm going to show you that Durbar Square too, because I think it looks like how the Kathmandu Durbar Square would have looked like maybe 20-30 years ago, not absolutely overrun by people trying to drain money out of tourists. Not that you shouldn't go to Kathmandu Durbar Square, but it's just that Bhaktapur looks far more ancient and important. Durbar Squares were the royal religious sites. It's where the royal family would have stayed, and it's surrounded by a temple complex in all of the Durbar Squares. But let's talk about the history, because it is quite unique. I suppose the indigenous people of the Kathmandu Valley, and by the way, I'm going to mostly be talking about the Kathmandu Valley because the rest of the area is just mountains and forest reserves, and my upstairs neighbor stomping directly above my head like he does. I assume it's a he every single time I film. So there you go. So we're going to talk about mostly the Kathmandu Valley because it's Kathmandu, okay? The, I guess, indigenous peoples of the valley would be the Nawar people who have lived there for who knows how long. We don't know a lot about the very early history. There's lots and lots of legends about it, though. But we know for sure that the first, kingdom dynasty to rule in the area would have been the Lichavi dynasty, who would have ruled the area sometime around 400 CE. And they were a Buddhist kingdom, and their reign is typically considered the golden age of Nepal. Classic Nepalese Buddhism. I believe it's during that time. The interesting story is that the king of Tibet, I didn't write down their names, so I'm completely forgetting it, although they're on the tip of my tongue. It's a famous story. The king of Tibet married a Lichavi princess here, and she brought Buddhism over with her, and that's how Buddhism was introduced to Tibet, which, can you imagine, not associating Tibet and Buddhism together? They're just, it's like peanut butter and jam, the two things that just go together. But that's how that happened. Just a fun story for you. Following them would have been the Malla dynasty. The Lichavi dynasty slowly weakened, and the Mallas took over. They reigned between 1201 and 1779, and they were a Hindu kingdom, and they built the Durbar Squares and many of the old Hindu sites in Kathmandu. Following them quite violently would have been the Gurkhas, who conquered the area at the Battle of Kathmandu in 1768. They established the Kingdom of Nepal. We get the name of the country. And some of my UK viewers might know the name Gurkha. I'm going to skip ahead in history a little bit. Just a little bit. The British started to take over Nepal after they were encroaching on their borders here in India, what's now India, right? And the British beat the Gurkha soldiers, but they were extremely impressed, and they wound up hiring them, enlisting them in a way, being like, you guys are the coolest. Do you want to fight for us for fun and profit? And they were like, sure. And the Gurkha soldiers are still around today in the British military. It's a very special branch of the British military of Gurkha soldiers. I think they were very prominent during World War One. World War One. I guess World War Two as well, but I forget which one it was, but there was one that they were very heavily involved. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to military history because I don't believe in war. But the Gurkhas took over, establishing the Kingdom of Nepal. They built a lot of famous sites, including the Tower of Dharahara, which we're going to look at on Google Earth. It was a military watchtower, but I think during peace times it was just like a cool tower to go up and see everything. It's like a fun little viewing spot, which sadly collapsed many times during earthquakes, but hold on to that thought. I guess the official last kingdom to take over would have been the Rana, who took over even more violently during the Kot massacre of 1846. The Gurkhas were crumbling from within. The Ranas were kind of like a powerful group within the royal circles, and they just killed everyone in their way and rose to the top. In a coup, I suppose, right? The Gurkhas were quite anti-British. The Ranas were very pro-British, so they really worked hand in hand with the British Empire, especially after, all of the wars where Britain annexed a lot of Nepal, which we're not addressing in this video because it doesn't have anything to do with Bagmati. That's the more outer regions. But they were quite peaceful with the British, and that might have been a little smart because Britain never really tried to fully conquer all of Nepal, right? They, for the most part, in their central core here in Kathmandu, let them be. So probably a very smart political move. The Rana kings also modernized the city quite a lot, utilizing what they would have considered British architecture and gardens and streets, schools and hospitals, and implementing them here in Kathmandu. A lot of which you can still see today. We'll take a look at some of them. Now, I didn't really find a lot of information between then and the 1990s. But, so, just fill in the blanks. World Wars and all of that. In 1990, the political situation in Kathmandu became very volatile. There was lots of protests, a big revolution, promoting democracy because the royal family pretty much had total control, and there were moments where they were like, oh sure, you can have a little democracy as a treat, and then they would take it back a couple years later and be like, actually we're the absolute monarchs, and people were obviously very upset by this. But the most upset by these would have been the Communist Party of Nepal, who I've seen a lot of research were described as Maoists, which, there's a big difference. And they fought quite violently for their right to be recognized and not persecuted in Nepal, which turned into a full-on civil war during the 1990s. In 2001, tragedy struck Kathmandu when one of the princes of the royal family went on a shooting rampage massacre and killed 9 members of his family, including the current king and queen, including himself, actually. Which really, I think, shook up the entire mindset, concept of a royal family, that they're very, very destroyable, I suppose. They are just people. They're not invincible, just like a very modern tragedy to happen in a very ancient city. Eventually, in 2008, democracy won out and the monarchy was abolished. A lot of the old castles that we'll see in Kathmandu are now government offices or museums. The royal family is no more. They're now a federal democratic republic. But one of the biggest disasters to happen recently struck in April 2015 when a huge earthquake hit the area. I think the epicenter was near Lalitpur, you can see here. which this is all Kathmandu. This is all a big city here. They're all separate, but this is all one big city area. Destroyed almost the entirety of the city and almost all of the ancient sites. Durbar Square in ruins. The Dharahara Tower completely collapsed. Yeah, pretty much no ancient sites were spared during this earthquake. And that's so sad. Almost all of them, I'd say 99% of it's all been rebuilt since. When we go look at the Dharahara Tower, it's really interesting because they built an exact replica right next to the old one, so you can still see the ruins from the earthquake there, but Durbar Square is completely redone. It measured between a 7.8 and 8.1 on the Richter scale, and was a Mercalli 10, which is very destructive, right? Obviously, because a lot of the city was destroyed. But it's been rebuilt since then. The Himalayas, like I said, when we were talking about Afghanistan over there, very volatile region because this land is just ever shifting. The tectonic plates of the Indian subcontinent are pushing further and further up, making the Himalayas taller and taller. That's creating more and more earthquakes, avalanches. I forgot the word for avalanches. Start going like this. Avalanches and things like that. Something to keep an eye on, just to make sure that all is well, And that is pretty much the history, and pretty much the history of the Kathmandu Valley. But that is the center of Bagmati, so that is what we talk about. So let's go see all of these fantastic sites. Head over to the tablet. Let's look at Kathmandu, and let's look at some of these mountains and national parks. So here it says Bagmati province. I guess that's its name. What did I say? District? Oh, here's Bagmati. Let's zoom out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. So here you can very clearly see the Himalayan mountain range dominating the landscape here. The beautiful lush green valleys. I forgot to mention the rivers. How you have all of these snow and glaciers. You have lots of runoff and so therefore lots of rivers. So it's quite green and lush underneath the Himalayas. And down south here you can see India. Here's Bagmati. You can very clearly see the valley here because you can see this mountain range and of course this mountain range. In the middle there's Kathmandu. Which you can see here's a huge, 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 huge city, isn't it? Let's head in and see what we can find in beautiful Kathmandu. I will say researching Nepalese food looks amazing. I've got to find a Nepalese restaurant pronto because this looks delicious. I'll talk a little bit about it more in tomorrow's video. We'll talk about Nepal some more. So here you can see is the Kathmandu Durbar Square, named after Hanuman, which popping up here at some point. Here he is, Hanuman. I guess let's just start with a slideshow. Kathmandu Durbar Square. You can see all of the very cool temples here. Beautiful, beautiful architecture. Isn't it lovely? Rainy day there. Oh, that's right. This slideshow's no good because it shows lots of other places that aren't in Durbar Square. But isn't it beautiful? It's so distinct. Let's take a look at some of these temples here. This, I believe, was the living quarters of the royal family, which is now a museum. You can see it's just absolutely crawling with people all over the place. Let's see. We can look at the Hanuman temple. There we go. You can see all the trinkets for sale. And beautiful buildings. I wish there were more pictures of the insides. But maybe it's considered like a little rude to take pictures inside the temples, maybe. You only ever really see, most of these slideshows are the outsides. Like there's a really neat museum down here. It's like the Nepal National Museum, but the slideshow is just pictures of the outside of the buildings. But you can see even from up here all of the people that are here to see Durbar Square, and you can see all of the little street vendors down here. But I think what's the most interesting that over here is the Kumari temple. Let's see. Very cool. Kumari is the only, I think you can see her over here, but there's a better picture later. The only deity in the world that is alive. She is represented not through a figure, statue, through an animal representation. She's represented through an actual living, breathing child. Taking photographs of Kumari is strictly prohibited because you can go into this temple every day and you can pray at Kumari, who was just this little girl who was all dolled up, being raised as a goddess. So I watched a really neat documentary about it just randomly like a couple years ago. How they, have a selection for these girls to become the Kumari, and then once she hits puberty, she just goes home and they find a new one. Let's see. There's a picture over here somewhere. So once a year she's paraded through the streets, and here we go. Someone got a snapshot of Kumari. It was just a regular little girl. Very interesting. I think it is quite sad. I mean, how do you just go home and live your life after that? I don't know, but that's the Kumari temple, the living goddess, presented through a little girl. Over here we can see the tower. Let me turn on everything so we can actually see there we go. Dharahara Tower, which is really cool, which nowadays you look at it like that's it, but imagine when it was built back in like the 1500s, late 1500s, 1600s. Buildings were only this high, right? So it must have been awesome. It was like the CN Tower of ancient times, right? It must have been absolutely massive. It's probably the view from above, from the distance. But over here you can see the old tower, like what's left of it. I think if I turn this off, it gives me the slideshow to show you I guess if I click this, hello, thank you, I guess. It's not what I wanted, but of course now it's not popping up. Why does this always happen whenever I film? Doesn't ever happen whenever I'm just researching. Alright, let me turn on everything. Look at this beautiful garden too. That's what I'm talking about, that kind of English concept, right? It's just the parking structure. I guess, here we go. That works. Not the slideshow I saw before, but this is what the tower looked like after the 2015 earthquake. So sad, isn't it? This beautiful tall tower, which we saw what it looked like, been standing for hundreds of years, and like I said, it actually collapsed a lot of times during other earthquakes in like the 1700s, but not nearly as badly as this in 2015. So sad, which is why it's so important that it's a UNESCO site and this area will be preserved forever. And the UN will always allocate funds to maintain it, and if there's another earthquake and that falls apart again, the United Nations will help rebuild it. Let me turn this off so we can not see all the shops. Forgot to mention Freak Street, which is nearby here. It's kind of like the Haight-Ashbury of Kathmandu. If you know your San Francisco geography, it's like the shopping kind of fun area. So, oh my goodness, I did not want to do that. No, thank you. I wanted to do this and look at the Garden of Dreams, which is one of the kind of British-inspired gardens that were built. So, like, it's not a British garden, right? You look at this, you would not picture this being in England, but it's definitely like a Nepalese vision of what a British garden would look like, with lots of open space and fountains and statues and things. And the Garden of Life is just a pretty name. And of course, lotus flowers. A big symbol of Buddhism and maybe Hinduism, but definitely Buddhism. Really pretty sights. There's so much to show you here. I'm trying to think of what else. There's all the palaces. You can see one over here. There's another. They're kind of easy to spot from above. And now, of course, I don't see any. Do you see any palaces, kids? But yeah. All the slideshows of them, though, are of the exteriors, not the interiors, which is really disappointing. I want to see the insides of these places, but like I said, like the big one, I think is over here, is a government building, so they're trying to work there, you know. We're going to hop over to here. Oh wait, I wanted to show you Buddhist temple. I think it's this one. No, but I think this is one of the UNESCO sites also. Hello, upstairs neighbor. This is a Hindu temple, as you can tell there. But there's a really beautiful Buddhist temple, which is part of the... See, here's the National Museum. It's just pictures of the exterior of the building. There's like 3 pictures of some exhibits, and they're just like little Hindu statues that you can really see in lots of places. So darn, where did it go? See, look, the city's just so sprawling. Why don't I cheat? Maybe my tablet was telling me something and wants me to go back here. Let's see. What was it called? Swayambhu is the one I wanted to show you. Let's see. Swayambhu, Kathmandu, Nepal. I wasn't terribly far. I just thought this place was so gorgeous. I love the little eyes. Very auspicious. Big Buddha's there. And the view from above. It's very hilly. There's little monkeys running around. All of Kathmandu is monkeys running around. I guess all of Bagmati was monkeys running around. Probably should have mentioned that Bagmati is named after the Bagmati River. One of the many, many rivers in this area. Lots of monkeys. I thought that was a neat temple, and it's a UNESCO site. Okay, I want to show you before I got distracted. It'll be over here somewhere, but I think I'm going to type it in too. Alright, I was a little off. Bhaktapur. To show you their Durbar Square. And there it is. Because I think it's just so beautiful. My upstairs neighbor thinks so too. See, it's so much more devoid of people. It's much quieter. And, makes me think that this is probably what it looked like. Like I said, like 20 to 30 years ago, this is probably what the Kathmandu Durbar Square was like. Very peaceful. People who are actually here to pray at the temples. Actually, doing their thing and not just full of tourists taking pictures. Not that that's a bad thing. I love tourist stuff. It's also pretty. Look at that lion. I'm so fascinated by it. I really hope to visit Kathmandu someday. And eat the food. This in Georgia, I think, is places that I absolutely need to try some of their food. Alright, let's zoom out here and look at some national parks. I'm going to turn the borders back on for Bagmati. Now my search is all full. There we go, Bagmati. So that we can see. I want to make sure you see one of the Himalayan mountains here. Lone Pogang, I think. It's so Himalayan coded. isn't it? It absolutely looks like it belongs in the Himalayas. There's beautiful prayer flags, clouds. But, I mean, it is in the Himalayas, so I hope it would look like a Himalayan peak. I looked up the height of this mountain. I believe it's 6,900 meters, which is 22,000 feet. It's a very majestic mountain. But all the Himalayan peaks are the tallest mountains in the world. I would love to see the Himalayas someday. Because a lot of the tourist videos I was watching for Kathmandu, they would go up like a hillside and they'd look out and see this in the distance. And every time I was like, wow. I would nerd out so hard being able to see the Himalayas in the distance. I have dreams about it sometimes, to be honest. I have lots of weird dreams about the Himalayas. Lots of, I don't know. I have a fear of heights, so I wonder if it's like height anxiety manifesting in my dreams. Of being like, I'm on this high mountain, please help. I don't know how I got here. But I feel like if this was me in real life, I would just be absolutely amazed. If you've seen my Grand Canyon video, my reaction to the Grand Canyon, just started bawling. That would be me here. So stunning. Look at them. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Himalayan mountains. I can also show you, I think, not that park, that's actually in India. It's this park here, which the border runs through the middle of it, of Bagmati at least. So this is more of the lowland region of Nepal, the Terai it's called. So it's that dark green area we saw from above where it gets really low and full of lush rivers and lush greenery. But again, this is the very like bottom of Bagmati. Most of it is big Himalayan mountaintops and this beautiful valley here. Did I show you this one already? Here, that national park. There we go. Well, look at this one to close out the video. I highly encourage you to play around Kathmandu because there is so much more to see in the city. Let me know if you find anything cool. I'd love to see it. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Tomorrow we are going to another very auspicious place with some absolutely gorgeous Buddhist stupas and the largest reclining Buddha in the world. Ooh, this guy's seen some stuff. This big. That's a neat statue. I kind of like it. So you're not going to want to miss it. It's absolutely cool. I'm going to tell you some really cool legends. Ooh, that doesn't look good. Probably earthquake damage. But I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night. Isn't this landscape absolutely magical? Good night. Good night.